Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to make a quick video for you guys on a topic that's been really famous, really popular in the mainstream at the current moment. It's almost as if people are calling foul, or they're calling, what would you say? They're showing their weakness, I would say. And I'll make it quite clear what I mean by that. But it's almost as if everyone believes there's a disease or a problem or kind of like a sickness in car culture. And I have seen this video countless times, and I see the scam that is being done to us. This kind of victim complex that we've developed, and it's a self actualizing victim complex. And I'll get into what that means. Why am I talking with big lingo today? It's because we're going to be talking about like the very philosophy that makes car culture, what makes us car guys, what makes us significant breed of humans that I believe have a lot to do with healthiness and really superiority to what is a non-car guy. A non-car guy, a non-car person, I would say, is a inferior person in our society because everyone needs a car. The people that don't need cars are typically, city folk or children, and these people, we have very little respect for them for a lot of good reasons. So let's start with a surface understanding, like what's wrong with car culture, and I'm looking at it as an external force. I'm not looking at it internally because you'll see that these two things are inherently connected, right? When you look at that dude in blue, or when you look at whatever your favorite vlogger is and he says that there's a problem with car culture, you'll see that a lot of their arguments is just outside understanding that is kind of seeping into our Trojan horse. So the first thing is that car culture is breeding evil. That's really the first problem here. Is that inherent belief that a person that likes cars or wants to buy a car or likes that kind of like experience, the car experience, which is also connected to sportiness and this kind of like transcendental feeling of nostalgia, adrenaline, and so on and so forth. It is evil in and of itself. This is like an external force. It's always existed, right? This is why we connect with outlaws, and we have muscle car tuners which have names like Demon, Hellcat. We got Exorcist, and we usually have this kind of like demonic or counterculture aspect to the car culture. And the question is that inherently because we perceive evil as good in our culture? Is it satanic? No, obviously not. Or is it because the external force believes us to be evil, bad for society? It's definitely the latter. What I mean by this is that the average, you know, non-car person believes us to be very dangerous. They believe cars to be very dangerous, right? They think the inherent nature of driving a car is very dangerous. And they believe that we are our own victims to the situation, right? A lot of people are against cars entirely. They want self-driving cars, which is kind of a tool to supply, let's say, or separate us from car culture. And they also believe that, for instance, you should ride a bike, you should take the bus, and so on and so forth. And whatever reason we are evil, it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, the same people that say that we're evil for X reason will eventually change their reason. They'll change, if you say, well, cars are safer today than they were in the 70s, they'll change their reason to, well, it's bad for the environment, right? And if we say cars are, they pollute less than a horse's manure, then they're just going to change their tune. Well, listen, trucks are not good, and trucks are a type of car. So all this to say that it doesn't matter where it comes from, but when we look at it internally, right, you look at, for instance, current movements of quote unquote car takeovers, which, by the way, we didn't even invent the term takeover, right? This is like a concept that has existed for decades, and yet once we add with takeover with the cars that inherently, I mean, you're gonna have some break-ins, right? I don't know if you guys have ever seen manifests or festivals, and most of them are very dangerous, more dangerous than any car takeover I've ever seen, and yet we're still the bad guy. Another surface problem that we've been seeing a lot is this extreme nature of modding or performance. A lot of people, they don't like their Corvettes. They think people have micro penises if they drive Corvettes, Ferraris, Lamborghinis. You kind of have that, that whole spiel, which has been disproven, but you have this kind of like crotch rocket mentality. People that have big cars, big motorcycles, and they're supposedly very dangerous. And we look at them and we're like, oh, you're a bunch of extremists. You believe in whatever nonsense that you project onto us. Bad for the earth. This is a pretty new one in terms of this constant belief of banning cars. It's just that they're bad for the earth. They're bad for the earth, right? It doesn't even matter what car you drive, whether it's Tesla, regular car. They're just all bad for the earth. So why would you even drive one? And in the end, we're also gaslit into believing that we're the toxic ones, that we have a toxic culture, that we somehow make up rules that are bad, or we have these social norms that are evil, and so on and so forth. When in reality, when you have all of this nonsense thrown at you, there's only one psychological action that people take, and it's that we throw it back at them, right? Whenever someone calls you toxic, what do? The first thing you do is you call them back. Yeah, well, you're toxic. You're a piece of shit. Blah, 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 blah. You're no better than me. And with the car culture, we've kind of done this to ourselves. Not sure why, but it's always been something that we do to ourselves, and we take it as a joke because we understand something much deeper, that these things are not true, right? A lot of these people that will believe this surface understanding don't understand that it's inherently absurd to believe that somehow social media made us more toxic, right? We always wanted to have the greatest cars. We always wanted to have, we want criticism. Criticism is good, especially when you're talking about technology. You need criticism to create better technology. Well, cars is technology, right? And it's just thrown around constantly for, again, that kind of surface understanding level, right? This half truth. And I'll explain to you guys why this happens. So let's talk about the good points of car culture. What makes it actually good? Why does it even exist in the first place? I think the very first aspect is that car culture has this deep masculine appreciation that is come forth. In general, now I'm not saying, right, you obviously have female car girls or whatnot, but in general, right, the idea of technology building onto the sciences and the understanding of what we are capable of, let's say the sportiness aspect, has a deep masculine trait, which we could see all the way through human history. And because of this, that the aspect that we build on ourselves, we build on these technologies, we work on something that is greater than us, something that is like a concrete definition of us, right? Zach owns a GT500. He builds on it. He made a 900 horsepower GT500, right? This is that appreciation that we're talking about. This kind of stoic understanding of the masculine appreciation, the transcendental progression in our lives, right? We want our lives to get better. We want us to get better. And the car, it represents that getting better, that progression in our lives. And because of that, it's an extremely rewarding hobby, right? You can fix an alternator and we look at you and say, wow, you fixed an alternator. You fixed an intercooler. Wow, you fixed an intercooler. Even swapping tires, right? When you were 4 or 5 years old, when you swapped tires, you felt good about yourself. You did something today, And that's something that you can't see in other hobbies. A lot of hobbies don't have that, right? You can, let's give you, an absurd example. Let's say you get into Warhammer. You could build your whole army in Warhammer, and it's like, okay, well, now you get to fight. You get to do your little games. There's no grudge matches. There's no appeal to your psychological needs. This kind of self-actualization that happens. And again, I'm using big words. Sorry, guys. But, that idea that it's a rewarding hobby is the most important part here. And that's why we build teams. That's why we have grouping and things like that, is because we're happy that we had those skills, and we were able to get those rewards, and we're happy that we did it together. So that's a really good part about car culture. Another aspect, and here I called it the zeitgeist. Really, zeitgeist, what it means is like uh, the thing which represents the times, right? Like an era, something that represents an era, right? If you think about the 80s, for instance, you think about beautiful target top Corvettes or Ferraris. You think of the big porn mustache. You think of the nice curly hair in the air. Okay, maybe that's Miami Vice 80s, but you get my point. And with cars, you can clearly see it's kind of like a car era. If you looked at historians in 1,000 years, and they looked at our era, one of the first things they're going to say is, listen, for the first time, people had their own vehicular transportation. Almost everyone on the planet had one. And almost everyone was able to get to speeds that not even, 100 years before, they could never even imagine get there, right? Nobody could go 100 kilometers an hour in 1920s, right? Maybe on a train, but before that, it wasn't a thing. It didn't exist, and much less that we had our own, right? Again, fixing that item, being able to do it in your house, that's ridiculous. That's unheard of, right? Most of the time you had technicians, machinists, some sort of mechanic, or you had a business, or even before that you had whole empires that had groups of people that were the, let's say, wisdom havers that were able to fix other things, architects, let's say. And just that whole idea didn't exist, just 100 years ago, 100, 200 years ago. And so that's ridiculous. It's one of the most interesting parts of our lives. If you guys like anime or like kind of sci-fi, if you ever seen a mech anime, a mecha anime, the first thing that we see, the icon is the robot, right? The robot. And the robot has a personality, it has like a character, and it's directly connected to that person. And that's exactly what we have in real life. That's what cars are, right? We don't have anything else like that in our culture today, right? You could look at PC culture, right? Building a computer, but it's nowhere near the same, right? And this creates a very versatile lifestyle. It creates an incredible lifestyle. Anyone can be connected to a car. Anyone can be a car guy. Anyone can be a car girl. And in your life, you can progress on your own aspects by getting a house, having children, blah, blah, blah. And your car will always represent who you are, right? It's a placeholder for your personality. It's really that deep, and it's insane how versatile that can be, right? A lot of the times people have, back in the day, had a hobby that was like their personality, and the hobby was not super versatile. For instance, working on your farm, right? Farmer people, they were very specific how they were, and there wasn't many kinds of farmer people, right? You had cow farmers, chicken farmers, and so on and so forth, and they had their own groups, but it was never they never had that kind of, it was kind of just their profession. Whereas here we're talking about literally just something you do every day that applies to your everyday life. It's insane. It's unheard of. And finally, because of all these aspects, we're talking about a culture that breeds wealth, prosperity, and health, right? We're talking about our psychological needs that are being provided. So that's the health part. The wealth, which is being able to actually have a lifestyle using the car, getting places A to B, being able to actually appreciate something in your life, being able to project what you want, your identity, to something insane, unheard of before. And finally, the prosperity aspect, which is, well, now that you have more time on your hands, now that you've done this psychological need, then now you could do other things in your life. And that's the prosperity aspect. People that have nice cars are happier. People that have nice cars get to enjoy other things in life, right? There's a reason why nice cars are in dating culture, in family building, and house building. These are all connected. So now let's talk about the enemies of car culture. How come there's so many? How come we have so many surface understandings that are completely wrong, that don't understand anything that is car culture? Well, it all starts internally, right? How come now we think that social media makes us more toxic or whatnot? Well, it's really the ignorance of the layman, right? There's some people in life that have not experienced enough. They really live in their little bubble. And when you give them some information, they believe it right from the get go, right? I'll give you a really quick example, and maybe that'll surprise you guys. But really big stereotype in the states is that they have a lot of school shootings, right? But in reality, when you look actually at the stats, you look at them and you realize, hold on, that makes no sense, right? You have actually not that many more than, say, in other places in the world, places where the crime rate is the same or more a little bit, and yet people have this kind of like, they stick these two ideas together, and it's really that idea that you're ignorant, you believe that surface level understanding, and then you kind of just apply it to whatever you know. Oh, well, there's a bunch of guns in the US, so they must have more school shooters. Or you believe like, well, they have gang fights, so that might be happening in a school, so therefore the school shooters are gang guys. Total nonsense, right? The next aspect, and again, laymen can be either car guys or non-car guys. Usually they're non-car guys that talk to surface level car guys. Yeah, I like my Nissan GTR. Oh, did you know that GTR is really dangerous because you could go 200 miles an hour? Oh my goodness, yeah, you're right, it is dangerous. Total nonsense. Then you have what you call the moms against cars. So you remember how I told you guys there's like a deep masculine appreciation of car culture? Well, the opposite is true when you look at the opposite sex, right? There's a lot of women, especially like very women that are very feelings based. A lot of people that are feelings based that don't like cars because they don't understand that kind of idea that like the willpower of driving something that is bigger than you. They don't understand that, right? They look at cars that are hard to drive and they say, oh no, that shouldn't be on the road, that's dangerous. Or they look at cars that have maybe one airbag less than they should, and they go, oh well, maybe if we added more airbags it would save more people. That makes sense. When in reality, these people are really just applying their feelings to, again, that layman understanding. So you could call it like a feelings-based person. You could call it like a person that doesn't understand what's going on. They really just understand whatever experience, whatever traumatic experience they've had, and apply it to the world. And you see that everywhere, right? You look at social media, like types of stuff they're talking about right now. People that are saying, I'd rather fight a bear than fight a man because a man would be way more dangerous and much less rational. Things like that, ridiculous. So that's the moms against cars aspect. Then you have what I call the administration propaganda. So take the layman and take the moms against cars and put them in a government context, right? These people govern us. They literally make our laws. They literally make our life. They control our life of some regard. And when you have laymen like Joe Biden, who doesn't even know what kind of Corvette he has, and you take moms against cars, which are your average voter. Oh yeah, I heard that here there's a guy close by that died because a kid hit him with a car. That means cars are dangerous. You take these two aspects and you put them in government, and boom, you get an anti-car culture government. That simple. And we see it everywhere. The EPA, safety standards, and CARB, and you just have a whole entire what we call a bureaucratic complex, which really just means you got your lobbyists on one side and your government, and they're just working with each other, and they're really working against cars, right? You look at Tesla, self-driving car. That's not car culture. Most Teslas look super ugly. They're disgusting on the road. They look like like a GTA car, an NPC car, right? And so on and so forth. And another enemy against car culture is that it's almost as if when you project your bad mentality, your destructive mentality, your selfish and ignorant mentality to car culture, you end up with some really weird results, right? You're talking about this ricer culture. You're talking about, some of these crackhead car cultures, like, I don't know if you guys have ever seen Squeeze Benz. He just literally races on the street. That guy has a serious mental problem if he thinks doing that stuff is safe or acceptable or should be happening, right? It's almost as if when we have problems, we project it to our cars, you end up with some really messed up stuff. And it's like everything else in the world, right? I'm sure there were many other problems that we had before that were just as messed up, right? Back in the day, there were mail bombings. Back in the day, there were people that would hijack planes and try to blow up stuff. these are all messed up, but at the end of the day, it's just a projection of who we are, right? If you want to make car culture better, just try to fix that with humans. It's impossible. And finally, the last thing is that I feel as though there's no vessel for conservation or prosperity. There's no context by which that we want to save our cars, right? You look at, like, for instance, old heads that own, Ferrari F40s, or they own really old cars, and they don't have a reason to save the car other than that feeling that they have about that car, that connection they have with the car. And that allows for some sort of conservation, but not the right kind. We should have a privatized conservation, which is like we're selling cars or we're building cars that make people feel a certain way. Whereas right now, what we have is, well, listen, I'm going to force this car to not be made so that there's less of these cars so that I feel something stronger about these cars. You look at these old heads, they're literally investing money in Tesla. They're literally investing money in companies that are anti-car culture because they know that it'll increase their car value. Like, this is something most people don't understand, right? You have to have a vessel to conserve these values, these virtues that you hold, right? If, for instance, the value that you hold or the vessel you hold is sportiness, you believe in a sport culture. You want people to have the to epitomize their own superiority, to understand who they are and where they're coming from, and to have a progression in their life. Then maybe you'll have a car culture that resembles that, but also is able to conserve itself under a certain culture. Well, it's almost as if these two things are getting disconnected. Right now, we're getting a more feelings culture. You got cancel culture, and you have these kinds of people that believe that everything they deserve everything that anyone could give them, and they shouldn't do anything to provide for themselves. Well, you're going to end up with this weird dichotomy where it's like, okay, well, car culture is evil because you're doing stuff, right? So, what should we do, right? I think the first aspect here, well, here I wrote car rights. Now, I don't believe in that stuff. I don't believe people have rights that the government just gives them. They just inherently have these things. Nobody gives them rights. But I feel as though we should use our tools against these kinds of actions, these ridiculous structures of action. Like, for instance, you have social rights, right? People say that every city should have a public transportation because otherwise, how would homeless people or people that are poor move around in the city? And I think we should push back and say, no, listen, we should have car rights, right? Every person under 16, and every person under 18 should have some basic knowledge about what cars are because they're everywhere, right? Anyone over the age of 15, let's say, should understand how a car works. Period. Right? There should not be any kind of like abstract, like, oh, well, you know what? I don't like cars. I choose to not like cars. Well, listen, they're everywhere. So you're going to have to appreciate them, right? We kind of took that for granted. We kind of say, well, listen, most people have some understanding because they've seen cars. Well, no, because they've never seen an engine. They've never seen transmission. They don't know what tires are. They don't even know where they come from, right? For a really long time, they thought tires were made out of like Jello or plastic. This is nonsense, right? We know how to make tires, and it would benefit all of us if the more we understood about the cars and the more we actually used cars, the more we actually promoted cars, how our market, right? I'll get to that in a sec here. It's almost as if everyone has a car, but nobody wants to defend it, right? It's the same thing as computers or internet or whatnot. It's almost as if we have that thing, we don't understand why it's good for us, and then we try to apply nonsense arbitrary rules against it to destroy it. And I think that if we created a car rights movement, that it would just fix all of that. Another aspect is that we should create an appreciating asset market. So one thing that I've found really, really ridiculous pretty early on, in the car culture is we epitomize logos and, let's say, variations of cars and products of cars and badges of cars. But we forget that cars lose value over time. Most cars lose value over time. We forget that these companies will stop producing a car and then they'll arbitrarily just start producing a new one, whether it's because someone else chose for them, like the government, or they couldn't afford it anymore and they don't want to help the customer by providing more services to them. At the end of the day, the customer is king, right? And any aspect that the car market doesn't give the customers, for instance, not having new wheels, not having specific tires, not having a specific bumper you want, not having headlights you want, not having the engine you want, not having the transmission you want, and so on and so forth, is bad for the customer. And if it's bad for the customer, it should be reflected with the business. Now, I'm not saying boycotting is the solution. I think boycotting is very short term, doesn't really do much. And to be honest, it doesn't control what controls the market. What controls the market right now is EPA and safety standards. Why do you think politicians are saying they want to ban cars by 2035? Okay, they've been saying that for years. They just kind of changed their position constantly, right? They started with, well, we need people to buy catalytic converters. That'll save the problem. Then they changed, okay, well, tires are kind of unethical, so let's actually make them synthetic now. And so on and so forth. We could go into that. It's like 100 years worth of banning stuff from cars, right? And it doesn't have to be that way, right? If we had some sort of car rights union or syndicate, we would be able to easily talk to dealerships. We'd be able to easily use our money to move the car market the way we want it, right? We could have sports car laws. We could have whatever we want, right? It's just a question of getting together. So building your own car market. We should make it such that cars are an appreciating asset. What do I mean by that? I mean that the chassis, the engine, and the transmission are parts which are inalienable with the car. And by making the cars, let's say, more unique, or let's say more resilient to the environment, we would be able to create a market in which cars become actually appreciable instead of depreciate. So depreciable doesn't just mean in value, but it also means that per customer, they just kind of look at their car as like something they could throw out, right? How can you throw out 85 grand worth of car? That's the average price of a car in Canadian dollars, new on the market. That is ridiculous. When we do that to ourselves, what we're really doing is we're making ourselves broke. If we want to be this kind of car rights syndicate or car rights reunion, then we must ensure that the market will be an appreciating asset market. Does that mean making collector cars? Every car is a collector car? Not necessarily. It could just mean that we need to transition between a car product market where we're actually selling batches of cars and so on and so forth to selling a components market where we're only selling the parts of the car instead of the whole car. That way we can also loophole through EPA and safety standards, not have to deal with that because listen, I'm just selling the crate engine, I'm just selling the transmission, parts like the tires and so on and so forth, so you can't ban these things. That way we could build our own car market, that way we could each have the engine and the car that we want, and once we want the cars we want, they will be appreciating assets. I want one forever car, you'll want one forever car, everyone will want one forever car, and that will be perfect. A perfect world, can we get there? I don't know. Finally, and the most important here, is to never respect those who spit on us, right? You have to understand, car culture is getting ruined, not because there's like toxicity going on or whatnot, if there's like one car guy here, he's ruining it. No. What's going on is that we as a car culture are getting divided on nonsense, things that have always existed, things that have always been a problem. And yet, they're dividing us and then claiming we're the problem, all right? They're the problem, right? They're trying to exclude us. They're trying to take away our cars. They're trying to take away our market, what we represent, what we want to live for. So the problem is not us. It's not specific kinds of car guys. It's the people who are blaming us. So that's pretty much it for today. Hope you guys enjoyed.